Hi everybody, my name is Brian Roberts, and in this video what we're going to cover are these things called the pentatonic polygons. So this is just a system that I kind of discovered. I think it was inspired partially by Paul Gilbert, but regardless of where I got it, it's something I teach, and let's just dive right in. So the pentatonic polygons. If you focus in on two strings at a time for your pentatonics, and this is assuming you know all 5 pentatonic shapes. So I call this one pattern 1, I call this one pattern 2, pattern 3, pattern 4, pattern 5, pattern 1. Okay? If you look at the last 2 strings, it would be up top over here, you should start noticing some shapes. Okay? So up here we have a big rectangle. If you count the top 2 here and the 2 there, that's like a big rectangle. So let's say we were playing in the key of G, or E minor, same thing. Pattern 1 there lives right here, between the 12th and 15th frets, right? If you focus in on the last 2 strings, you have 2 wide spacings completely on top of each other. And if we were to play a game of connect the dots, it would look a lot like a big rectangle, don't you think? So there you have a big rectangle. Now to either side of this big rectangle, we have the patterns. We have pattern 2, and we also have pattern 5. Okay, but if you focus in on the last 2 strings, so last 2 strings, take a look. We have yet another rectangle, but it's not as wide. Can you see that? It's a shorter distance. So I call this the square. And coincidentally, in pattern 5, you also have a square. So what am I getting at? Well, if you have a rectangle, big rectangle, it is surrounded to either side by little squares. So you can see the possibilities here. You could kind of just, almost like a expedient way of playing, you can go, okay, square, rectangle, square, without getting bogged down by the giant position. Okay, but let's keep moving. So we have a square, we have a square, we have a rectangle. If we kept going down, we have pattern 4 here. And if you focus in on the last 2 strings, you have this kind of wedge shape. That's called a trapezoid in your elementary geometry class. That is a trapezoid. So there you have it. Wide spacing on the bottom, short spacing on top of it. Okay, now if we kept going into pattern 3, and we focus in on the last 2 strings, we get another trapezoid. But it's not laid in the same way. So let's give them some good names. Instead of calling it trapezoid 1 and trapezoid 2, I give them silly little names. So this particular trapezoid, I call it the boat, because from my perspective, this is the ocean down here, this is the bottom of the boat, that's the kind of the bow and the hull right there, and that's the back end. So we're sailing this way on the boat. So I call that the boat. And then the previous position, well, if you have a boat and you need to bring it on land, it has to go up the ramp. So I call this the ramp. I don't know, it's just my silly way of remembering what it looks like. So the boat and the ramp connect to each other on that diagonal line. You should probably have already noticed that from previous explorations of the scales, but if you didn't, now you know. So the boat and the ramp are connected, and if you kept going down, now you have pattern 2, and you have a small square again. This is the same small square that's up here, it's just an octave higher. Okay, so the boat and the ramp are also surrounded by squares. Interesting. And then we return back to pattern 1, which gives us a giant rectangle. So this is a hard rule, everybody. Anytime you have a big rectangle, it is surrounded by squares. Anytime you have the boat, it connects to the ramp, and both the boat and the ramp are surrounded by squares. Am I moving around too fast? Anyway, you have a square and the rectangle is surrounded by squares. You have a boat which is connected to the ramp, and so on and so forth. This is true no matter what set of strings you're on as well. So for example, if you were on the middle two strings, the G and D strings, if you take a look at pattern 5, well, you have a giant rectangle right in the middle. So without thinking too hard, the big rectangle is always surrounded by squares. And that turns out to be true still. Then you're going to end up getting a ramp and a boat, which is then surrounded by squares. Square, boat, ramp, square, rectangle, square, boat, ramp, square. It's true no matter what set of strings you're on. So there you have it, people. That's kind of an easy way to chunk the information of the pentatonics. You can also think of your giant 6-string pattern as just components of these smaller shapes. So for example, back at pattern 1, we start off with a boat, then we have a square, then we have a rectangle. So we're chunking the information. Pattern 5, you have a square, rectangle, square. Pattern 4, you have a rectangle, a square, and then the ramp. Pattern 3, you have a square, you have a ramp, and then you have a boat. Pattern 2, you have a ramp, you have a boat, and you have a square. So that's another strategy that you can use if that helps you remember your scale boxes. And so that's kind of the introduction to the pentatonic polygons. I'll do another video with a little bit more advanced concepts, but try to remember that, folks. You have the rectangle surrounded by squares and the boat and ramp connected to each other, which is also surrounded by squares. All right, stay tuned for the next video.